For millions of years, the world we live in hosted a singular consciousness that manifested in various forms and shapes. Humans, in the form of thoughts or luminous souls, were part of this unified whole. Until the day when an invasive force entered this perfect world. This is part of an unwritten history that, based on the readings of the sleeping prophet in modern times, has defined the human race and the nature of humanity. Millions of years ago, when humans existed not in physical form, but as ethereal beings, like moving thoughts, life in the world flowed as a unified whole, and the souls of all beings were connected. Because of this, all lived in a state of constant balance and peace. However, this peace and equilibrium gradually disintegrated with the presence of invasive forces, and the luminous souls, who could move between different worlds at will, became confined to physical bodies. Shortly thereafter, they lost the ability to exit their physical dimension, and until the time of death, which marks the end of the physical body's life, they were imprisoned in their body. If this narrative sounds familiar to you, and you've heard about it before, then the stories of this man might also intrigue you. Most of the works that delve into Edgar Cayce's ideas focus on his psychic readings and his descriptions of the past lives of his clients. However, from these narratives, a consistent story of the millions of years of life on Earth emerges. This includes his readings about Atlantis, which reference the early presence of humans on Earth. According to Cayce's accounts, initially, and for millions of years, the human beings we know today did not exist. Instead, some beings existed as a collection of thoughts in the world and were part of an infinite unified consciousness. Descriptions of this unified consciousness liken it to God in religious beliefs, but a God not independent of other beings living in the sky. Rather a unified force formed by the collective gathering of all souls. The souls or spirits of humans were also part of this infinite whole. The luminous souls, who later became today's humans, when they were part of the whole consciousness, could easily move between non-material worlds and had the power of creation. Their experiences were also different from those of today's humans. In a space where there was no matter, no heat, and no cold, no one knew pain, suffering, or hardship, and of course, there were no physical pleasures. This description closely resembles the spiritual world in ancient Persian beliefs, specifically the world of light under the command of Zurvan. The ideal conditions of the spiritual world changed about 10.5 million years ago, with the presence of the first invasive forces on Earth, and the material world was introduced to these thought-like beings. The human physical body was also used as a tool and intermediary to give them the opportunity to experience the material world. Thus, they became like spirits that incarnated into and were embodied in human bodies. The first place on Earth where humans were physically embodied was a land called Lemuria. Through their physical bodies, humans could experience the world with their 5 senses, and in these experiences, they became familiar with sensual pleasures, which had the most allure for them. So, after each time they exited the physical body, they were tempted by the desire to repeat these experiences and return to the material world. The power and capacity of these luminous souls did not change upon entering the material world, and for this reason, the first humans, as part of the unified consciousness, had the power of creation. Some of them also began to innovate and create new beings. In these experiments, they used both stardust and the animals on Earth. Mythical creatures of this kind are said to be the result of these early experiments in creating new beings. However, one of the consequences of this, which later led to the downfall of these civilizations, was the disruption of the balance between positive and negative forces. The narrative suggests that initially the ethereal part of humans could easily exit the physical body and return to the spiritual world. But the more they indulged in the pleasures of life in the material world, and the more their attention was diverted from the spiritual world and occupied with their creations, the less their ability to leave the physical body became. Eventually, with the loss of their connection to the spiritual world, they became trapped and imprisoned in their physical bodies. At the same time, some of these souls, from the very beginning, were attracted to the pleasures of the material world and showed no inclination to leave their physical bodies. Thus, gradually, a population of humans in physical bodies emerged who had no concept of the spiritual world. Human life experienced a new transformation about 50,000 years ago with the formation of the civilization of Atlantis, where new forms of humans with supernatural powers appeared. Cayce's readings suggest that the humans residing in this area were gigantic compared to humans in other parts of the Earth, which is why the giants in mystical stories are associated with Atlantis. The average lifespan of these humans in Atlantis was between 500 and 700 years. They were between 3 and 4 meters tall, and each of their limbs had 6 fingers. A third form of life was also defined for Atlantis, which was a combination of humans and animals. These were the beings that the first humans had created millions of years before the rise of Atlantis civilization, such as centaurs, which are half human and half horse, or minotaurs in this shape. With these descriptions, the mythical creatures depicted on the walls of Persepolis in Iran could also be symbols of the land of Atlantis and, indeed, a legacy of the first humans from Lemuria. Some of Cayce's readings suggest that a group of humans on Earth were able to maintain their connection with the spiritual world, the unified whole that was the original source of their souls. Cayce refers to this group as the sons of the law of one, and calls them the pure race, those who were aware of the nature of their inner force and tried to create opportunities for the souls trapped in physical bodies to recognize the unified consciousness that was their origin and find their way back to the spiritual world. In discussions about this group, there is mention of souls who voluntarily, in human form, came from the spiritual world to Earth to acquaint humans with that part of their being that is always connected to the infinite eternal consciousness and to show them the path to join this consciousness. This path passes through the stars and planets, very similar to what we discussed in previous videos about the teachings of Mani, the Persian prophet, and Mithra, the ancient Persian god. At the same time, there is a second group in Cayce's narratives called the Sons of Belial, who had no belief in the spiritual nature of humans and focused on the pleasures of worldly life and the limited lifespan they had on Earth. Therefore, they tried to appropriate and control all the spiritual principles that the first group was promoting. The origins of both of these groups go back to the early presence of humans on Earth, when luminous souls in physical bodies still had the power of creation. Each of these two groups used their power differently, one aimed at maintaining balance on Earth and providing a foundation for the growth and ascent of human souls to the spiritual world, and the other for increasing their comfort in this world. One of their main differences was their approach and attitude toward beings referred to as things, who apparently had a lower level of understanding than the humans of Atlantis. In one interpretation, their approach to dealing with these human-made beings was a point of contention, whether they should be treated as animals serving them or as beings that needed to be helped to evolve and reach a higher level of existence. Also, Cayce speaks of a specific technology that could convert sunlight into crystals connected to Earth's inner energy. The Sons of Belial, at some point, used these crystals in such a way that disrupted Earth's internal energy balance. Alongside activities that had previously upset the balance of positive and negative energies, this eventually led to a series of natural events that caused the destruction of Atlantis. During this period, it seems that Earth's poles shifted and Cayce speaks of a form of climate change that had its roots in the changes in Earth's internal activities. Cayce connects the Great Flood, mentioned in various religious texts, to the last time Atlantis sank beneath the sea. Yet, contrary to today's religious narratives, in Cayce's version, many of Atlanteans managed to escape this Great Flood and migrate to neighbouring lands, taking with them the remnants of Atlantean civilization to the New World.